So they like to communicate face to face, not so much text messages and Teams messages and Slack.
A meeting for everything.
A meeting for everything. They value hierarchy and structural organization. And I definitely know that for a fact because they do not want you going over your head. They don't want anyone going over anyone's head. Different mentality than us, for sure. Because if I'm going to see the CEO in the elevator, me and him probably going to have a chat if he asks me something. You know what I mean? I wouldn't think it as going over my manager's head.
Yeah.
So they're very like, no, to go through the...
Follow the channels.
Yes.
Yeah.
All the channels.
Yeah.
And that's very when unwinding down, especially for Gen Z. Gen Z is like, what channels?
They're like, I got something to say.
I'm going to say it on Twitter. Or I'm going to say it, or X, excuse me.
Yeah.
I'm going to say it on X, or I'm going to say it on Instagram. Welcome back. So, Taryn, we are starting a new series.
We are.
On the generations.
Yeah, I'm excited about this.
So, today we are covering the boomers.
Baby boomers. Yeah.
Baby boomers. I correct myself there. Baby boomers. We're going to have Generation X. We're going to have millennials. Woo woo. And then we're going to have Gen Z. And so, just a brief overview of them. So, today we're talking about baby boomers. So, let's kind of get into that. So, they came after the silent generation. So we're looking at years 1946 to 1964. Big historic events that circled around boomers and them growing up. So Kennedy was president and was assassinated. Civil rights movement. ML King's assassination. The Vietnam War. And the first moon landing.
There's a lot that happened. Significant things.
So when we think about generations, and me and you've already talked about this a little bit, is every generation has defining historic moments, has defined them as people and how they perceive the world. And so for boomers, there were some really big things that happened, especially in this country. And so when I think about that, I think about, they were being raised during an economic prosperity in this country. So we were booming. A lot of social changes happening. The civil rights movement is very huge, especially if you were growing up in the Southeast.
Yeah.
That really had to mold you, shift you, change you in some ways. So what we see with them, though, is that they are very loyal to the companies they work for.
Yeah, absolutely. I think thinking back to, our I think of our parents, right? Our parents is, of course, maybe who comes first to mind with the baby boomer generation, but I also think about different leaders that I've had, at work and different things. Like they're just the way that they carry themselves in the workplace, their thought processes and things like that. So when you take into consideration the different things that happened, throughout their lifetime, it certainly molded them. The loyalty one is so big. As you and I were researching and talking about baby boomers, like the things that they bring to work, they are such a loyal generation to their workplace. And, they're there for the long haul.
Yeah.
And some of them still are.
No, they are, because I think in their generation, things that were important, right? Pension, 401k, benefits.
Yeah.
So if you could get in with a good company, that you were set. You didn't need to make any more decisions. You didn't need to go anywhere else. And so they grew up with that idea of that opportunity being sufficient. And so what we see is we go into companies and been here 35 years. Or you've been here 45 years. You're like, man, I'm not even that old. Or this was my first job out of college, or my first job out of high school.
Or they've worked up the ranks at that corporation, right? So they're like, oh yeah, I've held 15 positions.
I met somebody who told me that they used to work in the mailroom.
Yeah.
That's a real thing.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Listen, I worked with those people. They worked their way. Well, they were they delivered the paper first.
Yeah.
And then they worked their way up and literally held a position in every part of the company.
Yeah. So
it's phenomenal too to think about.
Yes.
But I think for you and I as millennials, we're like, what?
Well, it came at a cost. So boomers do have the highest divorce rate. And so being loyal to companies and that being a priority was very important to them. and working hard. Now, they obviously did not work like we work now. It was a different atmosphere, but definitely something interesting. Bill Gates, Oprah, Mark Cuban, some very successful boomers
Yeah.
that have made empires, to be completely honest, because they had a passion for what they were doing. Very interesting. They have a very interesting work style. So let me just name some stuff off. They value hard work, experiences, define themselves by their professional accomplishments. So we know that.
Yeah.
So awards.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. You're like,
The more awards, and they've got them all displayed in the office too.
Yeah.
Every shelf.
yeah. And I think public acknowledgement. They
Yeah.
really love shout outs and like thank yous. Like that's really big for them.
Which, I think it's good to showcase like the appreciation and to honor people that have put in their time. Like, I think that's a good thing. But I think the more down the line that you go with the millennials, and as we discussed Gen Z, like we don't necessarily care as much about those things.
I don't think we care at all.
Well, some people might.
We're like, show me the money. Like,
Where's the money?
yeah. So
Where's
for us,
this impacting my paycheck?
there might be some people that really do care about that. And I think it's good for everyone to get praise and
Yeah.
be acknowledged for something they're doing.
Didn't you tell me about this big award that you got at work?
No, I told you about the most humongous trophy that is like half my height that was given to me for being a change champion. And so it's a huge trophy. And the guy that presented it to me was super excited.
Yeah.
He's
Was
like-
he a boomer?
Absolutely. 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 He was so excited.
He went and picked the trophy out
He
himself.
went and got everybody trophies. Like,
Oh, well, that's nice, though.
I don't know. I don't know. Like the rest
Was
of
it
us,
filled with money?
no. But I filled my drinks in there. I mean, like I didn't know what else to do. It was so huge, and so, but he was so excited. I could see the excitement on his face.
Yeah.
Like you got this trophy.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I don't really need a trophy, but I still have it. I don't know what to do with it. Obviously, I carried it around from cube to cube for a while.
That's
but
so funny.
But he was so excited about it.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking, wow, this is like really important to him. This
Yeah.
is a big deal.
Yeah.
So it's just very interesting. They're very much mentality, pay your dues.
Mm-hmm.
So pay your dues is like, they believe that, I think it's an older mentality. Oh, you're an intern, you should be doing the scrap work and things like that. And I think our mentality is just not that way.
Yeah.
And we're more about, okay, what skill sets do you have? How
Right.
can we utilize you? How can we develop you?
Yeah, absolutely. I
Yeah.
mean, in my mind, I think of interns coming in. I'm like, what knowledge do they have? What area can we like put them to work?
Yeah.
Or to help foster, bring in new ideas and things like that.
Yeah, interns, I don't look at interns as somebody to do the grunt work. I look at it as like, what are you thinking?
Yeah.
Because that's most likely going to be the future.
Right, exactly. Outside perspective. Like, what do you see? What can we change?
And how could we be more relevant? Because you're going to be the future customer.
Uh-huh.
So I need to be thinking now about what they're going to need in the future.
Yeah.
And so I think we could utilize your interns a better way. I think companies are just missing out on opportunity there. And I think it's unfortunate because I don't think everyone has to climb the corporate ladder in 29, 30 years.
Well, I don't think that people are desiring to climb the corporate ladder
Yeah.
so much. You and I are corporate dropouts.
Yeah.
Then we're not, the norm necessarily, but I think a lot of people are looking outside of the box, and the box of what corporate culture has created in a sense. I think there's a lot of people that, and we're going to be talking more about this, I know, as we talk about the different generations, but like the things that mean as much to us are not the same as what they once were for baby boomers.
So they like to communicate face to face, not so much text messages and Teams messages
Yeah.
and Slack.
A meeting for everything.
A meeting for everything. They value hierarchy and structural organization. And I definitely know that for a fact because
Yeah.
they do not want you going over your head. They don't want anyone going over anyone's head. Different mentality than us, for sure. Because if I'm going to see the CEO in the elevator, me and him probably going to have a chat if he asks me something. You know what I mean? I wouldn't think it as going over my manager's head.
Yeah.
So they're very like, no, to go through the
Follow the channels.
yes, all the channels.
Yeah.
And that's very unwinding down, especially for Gen Z. Gen Z is like, what channels?
Yeah. They're like, I got something to
Yeah,
say.
I'm going to say it on Twitter. Or I'm going to say it on
Yeah.
X, excuse me.
Yeah.
I'm going to say it on X or I'm going to say it on Instagram. So very interesting but they do bring a lot to the workforce. Their experience, their loyalty has added something to them as far as understanding the company and understanding the customers. They can add value as long as they're growing and adapting. And so one of the things you're seeing now, and I think I have an article here, I want to say it's a Harvard Review, where they were talking about how big companies, big name companies, Bank of America, Walgreens, Boeing, are actually calling boomers out of retirement to come back. We saw massive, massive retirement happen during COVID.
Yeah, tons of them. Well, and I think some chose retirement, chose maybe early retirement.
Sure.
Some might have been forced into retirement. But then what you're seeing now is like many of them are coming back on their own, but also being asked to come back because it's like corporations kind of lost that some of that workforce that was loyal, that understood the ins and outs of the business. And so I think many of them were like, still wanted to continue working.
Yeah. But I have seen tensions with boomers and younger generations.
Oh, yeah.
In the workplace, very much
Yeah.
so. I stay out of it, and maybe that could be culturally too, because from my culture, we are very reverent of older people. So we're careful. I don't try to disrespect people that are older than me. I see them as being older than me. So that could be a cultural aspect. But I have seen my colleagues, just really be like, this person is so out of date with everything that's going on, And so not having that awareness of people around them or the times changing. And I'm going to bring this up because I think you have a story for me. You have a boomer story.
I do have a story.
Yes.
So without giving too much away, because I know there's probably some folks that are out there that I used to work with that might be listening. And if you're listening, you might put this story together and be able to identify who this person is. But yeah, so one of, I'm trying to think, it's been years ago now, but just to help paint a picture, like I was 8 months pregnant, maybe close to 9 months pregnant. And I was in a strategic planning meeting, sitting around this boardroom table with other individuals. There's other females, different age groups too. And the gentleman who's the baby boomer that the story is about, he was in a position of leadership, and we're sitting around the table discussing things for hours at this point. And in my mind, I'm like, is this a good use of our time? Like, this is not efficient. This is the furthest thing from efficient. So I'm getting frustrated on top of needing to use the restroom. So we had been in this room for hours at this point. I mean, no joke. I stand up to go to use the restroom, and he looks at me and is like, "Are you leaving?" I'm like, I need to use the restroom. Is that okay? And he goes, "Well, we're in the middle of something. Can you just wait a minute?" Julie, like, who says that? I mean, I'm clearly pregnant. We've been in there for like 3 hours at this point. I look at him, and I'm pretty sure my jaw hit the floor, as did everyone else's, especially, the other females that were in the room. I sat back down.
What? Why?
I know, right? Why did I sit back down? I think I was so stunned at his response. I just was like, unbelievable. So I sit back down, and like 10 minutes go by. At this point, I'm just like, stewing inside. I stand up and I look directly at him and I go, "Is it okay if I go use the restroom at this point?" And he was like, "Sure." And I walked out that hallway thinking, I don't know if I can go back in there.
Yeah.
Like, really? And what was so frustrating is, like, number one, you don't tell a pregnant person that she can't go use the restroom.
Yeah.
Like, how out of touch are you?
Was he married?
Yes.
Really?
With children.
Okay, interesting.
But,
okay.
and listen, I'm not saying every boomer, every baby boomer is this out of touch with, an employee or someone that they work with. But in this particular scenario, he was completely out of touch.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry, like, that just shouldn't have happened.
Yeah.
It shouldn't have happened.
No, that's wild. I'm surprised you stayed.
I'm surprised I stayed at the company after that.
Facts. No, I do. I think that's an extreme, obviously.
It is an extreme.
Yeah. Because I definitely have worked with boomers who are very motherly and fatherly.
Oh, me too. I've had some great ones. And
Yeah.
a friend that I'm friends with, that past colleagues and, continue a relationship. But then there are some that's just like, so that tension that you're talking about, it's just like, you have to have an understanding for the other person.
Yes.
And, if someone is carrying a child, like, that's a little hard not to notice. Like, you have to be pretty unaware of your surroundings.
Yeah. And I think I also have a few discussions where I'm kind of like, hey, we can communicate that in email. We don't need to have a meeting for that. And so they love that interaction. That's their communication style. They're the king and queens of networking. They created that.
Which is a good thing.
Yes.
I think networking is phenomenal. You can really help open up some doors. I've thrived and had some great connections in networking spaces, but then there are also times that maybe it's not the most effective way to have those interactions happening.
Sure. I think it depends on what you're talking about and what you're trying to convey.
What the goal is.
Yeah. I think sometimes for people, face to face can be beneficial for some people. And for some people, you're not that great face to face. It's better if it came in an email, so I think some personalities make a big difference in how things are communicated.
Yeah.
And so I think for some people, but I think they're trying to make that connection. They're trying to make that connection face to face. And so they prefer that.
Well, and it depends on the job. It depends on the industry. For my background, I was working in a sales capacity. I've worked in marketing and advertising, but when there's a sales component to it, it's like there's a level of, face-to-face interaction that really does add, that just connecting with another person. It's important. You pick up on body language and you pick up on different cues, surrounding the room, things like that you're not going to get that through an email. And so, when you can have that engagement, it's certainly important. And so I think it does depend on the industry.
Yeah, I think also for me is, as a millennial, geriatric, whatever they called it.
They call you a geriatric? I think you gave yourself that title.
No, I think that's
it's not
a
real thing. No, it's not.
No, it is. It is. I bet you we can Google it and it comes up. It's like a thing.
It's not.
And so boomers, they remind me of my parents.
Yeah.
And so the annoyance factor is there. Like, if you're going to be an annoying boomer, you're going to sound like my mom or my dad. So for me, but I have the experience with my parents. So maybe there's some things they do. I'm like, oh, it's just fine. Like, it's not a big deal because you're used to it.
You expect it.
Yeah. But I do see a lot more tense with Gen Z.
Well, sure.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the complete opposites,
Yeah. And they have no, either one has I feel like no consideration for the other. And so you're always trying to be like, hey, it's okay, guys. We're not that far removed. And so, and even their concept of work ethic. I've had conversations with boomers about what is work ethic to you?
Yeah.
So to them, it's showing up on time. And there's other things there, or not calling out when you're sick.
Yeah. We've been seeing so many of those funny things on funny TikTok videos where people are imitating the boomer generation, the Gen X, and how the millennial or Gen Z responds. Some of them are hilarious.
And accurate. Full-blown accurate.
The millennial shows up in his Snuggie.
Onesie, yeah.
It's not like a onesie or Snuggie thing. And then the boomer's got his blazer on.
Yeah. Yeah. No, accurate. The accuracy is wild to me.
Yeah.
Because I realize it's humor, but there's accuracy in that.
There is some accuracy. And the thing is, too, it's you may carry yourself differently. And I'm not saying that you should all show up, to work with, a onesie or a Snuggie, whatever you want to call it.
Never had a Snuggie.
I haven't either.
I think about investing in
need
that.
one for Christmas.
I need a Snuggie.
Wait, your birthday's coming up soon.
Yeah, I need a Snuggie. He looks really comfortable when he's...
He does, when he does the videos.
Yeah. So, I think I'm interested to see what's going to happen. They are working longer than the generation before them. So I expect them to be in the workforce longer.
Yeah.
They're not in a hurry to retire all that much. I think they still have a lot to give.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I do think that, as millennials and Gen Z that's coming up, and then the following, there are things to be learned from every generation before us. I firmly believe that. And I've had mentors, I've had people that have just really taught me some sound wisdom in navigating the workplaces along the way. But I do think that it needs to go both ways. And we see more and more of that, especially with technology and things that, well, of course, Gen X, and we'll talk more about that, but Gen X and millennials have brought a lot of that to the workplace. And I think there's things that can be learned both ways.
Yeah.
Instead of being so dismissive.
You know what a really smart boomer taught me? How to brown nose.
Okay.
I didn't really know. I knew what brown nosing was, but I didn't know how to do it. And I remember her telling me, if you want to make it in this company, you're going to have to brown nose. And I was like, well, I already have a brown nose. So
you're like, I am brown.
But what does that look like? And it's that networking. It's that. It's the Christmas gifts. It's all the things.
All the things.
Yeah, it's all the things. And I was just like, I don't know that I care that much. Don't. That's when the real millennial comes through. You're kind of like, yeah, no. I'm actually great at what I do. Mm-hmm.
That should be enough.
Yeah.
That should be enough. We shouldn't have to do the other things that don't bring value to who you are.
And have you noticed, I feel like baby boomers always sign up for the extracurriculars. I'll volunteer for that. And I'm like, yeah, no. I'm watching for that.
Boundaries.
Yeah, they're just that. But the thing with them is too though is they've got really good work-life balance.
Who?
Boomers.
Boomers. Yeah.
Because when they were growing up, they didn't have cell phones and emails attached to them, so they've learned a way to, hey, I'm not taking work home with me. Right?
Well, and that's the thing too. Like if your boss, who was a boomer, was not at the computer, he wasn't answering, the email until the next morning at 5 a.m.
Yeah, but
because he wasn't going to.
Yeah,
he's
and
out
my
of the
boomer bosses don't text me or email me after hours either.
Well, they're all golfing.
Yeah. So that's the benefit of that.
Yeah.
Because I feel like they're not being like, hey, can you get this done? Or, hey, just following up on this. And it's like, you're having dinner with your family. And that doesn't happen.
Yeah.
So there are some benefits there because they're kind of good about that work-life balance.
Yeah. I think like I said, I think there's a lot that we can learn from boomers. And I think that there's a lot that boomers can learn from other people. But I think the point of us kind of discussing this generations in the workplace is just to bring about awareness to help, have an understanding for our colleagues, for those that we work and interact with. And doing that, having an understanding and awareness that helps, that helps in our own pursuit of ourselves in the workplace, or even just people that are in our household, in our family, thinking about our parents or neighbors. There are interactions that we have regularly that if we don't have an awareness, it just creates like a tension when it comes to communication.
Yeah. And I think to build those relationships, awareness is important of others. And I think that's why it's important to be like, well, they grew up in a generation like this, and this is what they saw, and this is their perception. And it doesn't mean we have to agree with it. It just is, hey, let's just be mindful of that as we're going through and noticing these things. I have to do that a lot with parents, right?
Yeah.
Or uncles or aunts or whatever.
Yeah.
You have to understand the way they grew up.
Sure.
So it's very interesting to see. I'm interested to see what's going to happen in the next 10 years.
Yeah.
As we see more Gen Z come in, what's going to happen with the boomers? I think we're going to see them rise.
Yeah. So we're going to talk to the next generations. What's the next generation after baby boomers?
Generation X, the forgotten generation. How conveniently you forgot them.
Sorry, friends that are Gen Xers. Yeah.
Yeah,
so we're going to talk more on Gen X too,
Yeah.
which I think that's going to be interesting.
That will be interesting if we can come up with anything.
Stop.
No, I know lots of Gen Xers. They're amazing. But yeah, I think it's going to be good.